National Registered Dietitian Day. So, chances are this was not marked on your calendar as a national holiday that you wanted to celebrate today, but surprise, we're going to celebrate it together today. And every year, as National Registered Dietitian Day, like every year it hits, it's so interesting because it helps me reflect on the previous version of myself when I was a dietitian or when I was a dietetic student. And we work with a ton of dietetic students at Find Food Freedom, at What the Actual Fork podcast. We have a few that we work with as well. And Chelsea, our manager, who has grown and evolved with us. Um, it's just amazing to see. And so many dietetic students we work with have such amazing like curiosity and so many amazing questions when they come in and work with our teams. And so it helps me reflect every dietitian day, every year to say, what kind of dietitian was I in the past? What kind of dietitian am I today? And how do I want to continue to grow and evolve and be the most authentic version of myself with my dietitian hat on so I can best serve our communities and always come back to our mission of helping people make peace with food and their body. Now, this may be a surprise for some of you, but I was not always an intuitive eating dietitian. And for those of you who are like OG Find Food Freedom, groupies, if you will, then you know my true colors and where I came from and how much unlearning I had to do. But I feel like this is a very important thing to talk about, especially on Registered Dietitian Day, because National Registered Dietitian Day, because so often when we talk with people in our online community or, just maybe potential clients and they're like, you know what? I'm going to put a pin in this. Instead of working with Find Food Freedom, I'm going to go through my insurance and I'm just going to go find like a general registered dietitian, just like a very general one. And I also think that people on social media, which that's all of us, right? If you're watching this right now, if you're listening to this right now, you engage in social media. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of registered dietitians out there. And it can be really confusing because you're going to hear people saying things similar to the message of Find Food Freedom. And then you're going to hear people saying complete polar opposite bullshit of, like you should only eat 1,200 calories a day or you should starve yourself or whatever. So I wanted to talk about today my transition from a diet culture dietitian, as I used to call myself, to a intuitive eating registered dietitian. First, before I talk about my transition, I want to talk about the difference between the two. Like, what's the actual difference? Like, what does it mean if you go meet with a dietitian who is rooted in diet culture? And what does it mean if you work with a dietitian who is a certified intuitive eating counselor and rooted in a weight neutral approach? And those are two completely different things. But it's confusing because if you're looking for a registered dietitian, you might think it doesn't matter who I meet with. I just want to meet with a registered dietitian. But I'm here to really make you curious, plant some seeds, and talk about how different those two things can be. So, before we get started, I want to very clearly state that you do not need to feel guilt or shame if, when I start to talk about the diet culture version of me, when I was a dietitian, that you're like, that's me, right? Like I'm doing that right now. The reason this is so important is, and the reason I share my story is because I got to a point where I realized I had enough awareness that I was causing harm and that I wasn't helping people. And I don't believe that any health professional goes into the field saying, I can't wait to cause harm, right? Like that's not why we go into the medical field. we go into the medical field usually saying something along the lines of, I want to help people. And so if you start to, let's say, when you hear my story, when you hear some of the things I'm saying, that you're like, oh shit, I'm causing harm. I'm not talking about this to instill guilt or shame into anyone. I'm here to hopefully create curiosity of, if you do feel like you're causing harm, what steps can you take to stop doing that? And how can you know, go full force into a career that's going to make you feel valued and going to fill up your cup and make you know that you're helping people. And I believe that this is possible for every human being, because if I can, I hate when people say, if I can do it, you can do it. But truly, like, and we're going to talk about why. So first, let's talk about, okay, diet culture dietitian versus intuitive eating dietitian. The reason I feel so comfortable, sharing the difference between these two is because I used to be the diet culture dietitian. Like, I know it inside and out. I know all the tips and tricks. And now I very much so know what it's like to be a certified intuitive eating counselor. I have body image certifications I've done additional training in. I have a team of intuitive eating counselors on our team. So, like, I know both sides of it. And so I'm happy to disclose both sides of it. So let's talk about a diet culture dietitian. Now, nobody actually promotes themselves as a diet culture dietitian. If they do, that's fucking buck wild. And I've never seen it before. I really don't hope anyone's doing that. But a diet culture dietitian, what that means, when I say that that was me, it is a dietitian who is just classically trained. And why I say that is because the education in specifically the States, when you get a bachelor's of nutritional science, a lot of the coursework is rooted in diet culture. There were literal classes called weight management where we learned how to restrict people, cut their favorite foods out of their diet to intentionally shrink their body. That, my friends, is literally a prescription for an eating disorder. So when I say like diet culture dietitian, I'm just talking like a classically trained dietitian. And that's why when we transition from classically trained to intuitive eating, eating disorder, health at every size, there's a lot of shame that comes with it, because you feel like, again, you start to recognize how much harm you're doing. You start to realize, oh my God, I don't know anything. Everything that's been taught to me is a lie. This is all wrong. And you start to self blame. I'm here to tell you that you can't do better until you know better. So it's important to recognize, if you're somebody who has gotten this education very steeped in diet culture, you don't need to feel shame. We just need to recognize that's the coursework that I learned, right? That's the education that I got. And where can I go to unlearn some of this and start to look at different belief systems? So let's go back. Let's do like a direct comparison. So a classically trained dietitian, or as I call it, a diet culture dietitian, holds the beliefs that smaller is better. Residing in a smaller body is better. A diet culture dietitian believes that your weight directly correlates to your health. So, like, weight equals health, right? Losing weight equals health. A diet culture dietitian creates shame and guilt in counseling sessions because they push their agenda on their clients and make a lot of assumptions about the person sitting in front of them without knowing things. A diet culture dietitian is taught that they are the expert, that they know their client better than their client knows themselves. It comes from a very authoritative place. So when you are meeting with a dietitian who's very classically trained as the expert, they are going to tell you what to do, right? They're going to slide the meal plan across the desk. They're going to give you the calorie ranges that you have to follow. They're going to give you macro ranges that you have to follow. Again, this very authoritative, like do as I say kind of model. A diet culture dietitian, classically trained dietitian, often I find uses a lot of marketing tactics around their body. And so what I mean by this is when they, let's say they have a private practice or they're a counselor, they will, their Instagram feed, their website is loaded with pictures of them and more specifically their body and used as a marketing ploy. So it may be like a very clear marketing ploy of like, follow my meal plan and eat my macros and eat my calorie ranges and you'll look like me. Like that's like no shit, a red flag. But it might not even be that clear. It could be someone who does a lot of dances in front of a camera, resides in a thin or straight size body. And what does that tell us, right? Like as a consumer, that tells us, oh, without even them saying it, it's like, oh, she's small, she's tiny, she helps people with food. And it creates that connection of if I follow her, if I um do whatever she tells me, I'm going to look like her. And so that we're going to get into a little bit more because we see that all the time. Now, obviously, if you are an educator, if you're a counselor, if you're a dietitian, hello, I'm all of those things. You have to show up in a space to be able to connect with your audience, to connect with your community, but there's a way that we can do it that does not put the body on show, right? Especially if you hold privileges. So, one last thing I'll say that I think this is where a lot of the confusion sets in is that a classically trained dietitian, this is the only thing that if we had a Venn diagram, like let's think of like an old school Venn diagram, right? We're going to have the diet culture side, we're going to have the intuitive eating side, and there's like that one little sliver of the Venn diagram, that part in the center that overlaps. This is the only thing that overlaps. Medical nutrition therapy. Okay. So, what I mean by that is there are medical diseases and conditions that when we are diagnosed with, there are things that we can do from a nutrition standpoint that are going to support that disease state, help aid different symptoms, and just make our bodies feel more pleasant physically, mentally, and emotionally. Now, medical nutrition therapy is a part of diet culture. And let me go back on that. It's not a part of diet culture. It's a part of being a dietitian, right? So a classically trained dietitian, which in this example, I'm calling a diet culture dietitian, which can be confusing. Medical nutrition therapy is also very much so a part of intuitive eating. When we look at the 10th intuitive eating principle, honor your health with gentle nutrition, this is where if we have a client that has type 2 diabetes, hypothyroidism, cancer, autoimmune disease, high blood pressure, recovering from a heart attack, we're going to do things and discuss things with their nutrition from a medical nutrition therapy standpoint that is going to support them, their body, make them feel physically, mentally, emotionally pleasant. Now, I find there's a big misconception and a big myth on social media, lots of misinformation of people thinking that intuitive eating does not include medical nutrition therapy. It does. It very much so does. But the difference is if somebody has guilt or shame associated to food, like if their relationship with food is so poor where they can't have certain things in the house, they are constantly restricting and binging, I'm never going to start with medical nutrition therapy with them because we need to first help heal their relationship with food before we can get to medical nutrition therapy. So that's a very big difference. So we just went over a lot of the things, right, that a diet culture dietitian does. And again, when I'm speaking in like, that's what a diet culture dietitian does, that was me. That was mama. Okay. Did that for many years because that is what I was taught to do. So now I'm going to talk about, okay, what is the difference, right? What do I do now as an intuitive eating dietitian? And then I'm going to give you some practical steps if you are a nutrition student and or a new dietitian and you're listening to this like, "Oh my god, what do I do? Like I want to be an intuitive eating dietitian, but how the hell am I supposed to do that?" Then I'm going to give you some practical steps because I know how hard it is. I know how overwhelming it is. But I'm here to tell you that like if you want to be an intuitive eating dietitian, if you want to work out of the health at every size paradigm, you can do it. So, being an intuitive eating dietitian, the big difference is you're not causing harm. Like no harm is being caused in the medical setting. Now, does that mean you don't make mistakes? Absolutely not. If you're a human being, you're going to make mistakes. But being able to recognize those mistakes and learn from them and grow from them and evolve and talk about them. And that's again like why I share my story from diet culture dietitian to intuitive eating dietitian. I'm happy to shout it from the rooftops because if it can help just one dietitian or one nutrition student that it feels stuck and paralyzed, then I am so happy to help and share. Okay, so being an intuitive eating dietitian, one big difference that we talked about, recognizing your privileges. I talked about as a diet culture dietitian, someone who preaches that weight equals health and using your body as this marketing tactic. It's the complete opposite with intuitive eating. You are going to, as an intuitive eating dietitian, and something that I am always working on is working on recognizing my privileges. Now, I'm not going to state that in every single video that I make because that would get really redundant and people would be like, okay, you've said it enough. But making sure that you're educating your audience on what is thin privilege, recognizing that, I have white, thin privilege. I have, I'm able bodied, I'm cisgendered, I'm heterosexual. These are all privileges that I hold, that people respect me just because I hold these privileges. And there's a lot of bias to unpack there. So recognizing your privileges is extremely important, calling that out, talking about it, getting support where you need it. So we have an anti-fat bias consultant, Vinny Wellsby, that we brought in to the Find Food Freedom team. So really taking your own bias and fat phobia and privileges and like putting them under a microscope and talking about them and learning about them and how it affects how you show up in the world. That is a huge part of being an intuitive eating dietitian that I had no idea until I came over to this space. And so that is huge, right? Diet culture dietitian is going to use their privileges as marketing tactics and prey on those insecurities of body size for their audience versus an intuitive eating dietitian is going to call out these privileges. So we talked about an intuitive eating dietitian causing no harm, right? This is from a weight neutral perspective. As an intuitive eating dietitian, I believe that every human being deserves fair, unbiased healthcare. I will never look at a person and make judgments or assumptions on this person's health, on their medical diseases and conditions based on the body that they reside in, versus when you're working out of a classically trained nutrition approach. If you equate weight to health, you're going to look at somebody in a larger body and just assume that you know things about them that you absolutely don't. If the size of somebody's body equaled their health, then that meant that every single person that resides in a smaller body or a straight size body would have no medical diseases or conditions, right? But then that means that everybody that lived in a larger body would have all the medical diseases and conditions and could not have a clean bill of health. And so unpacking those belief systems is a huge part of being an intuitive eating dietitian. Um, Other things that being an intuitive eating dietitian that maybe I didn't know or expect before I came over to this space, there is a lot of unlearning. That was something that I don't know I don't know if you can truly know how much unlearning you have to do until you're in this space. I went to Penn State University where I got my bachelor's in nutritional sciences. And of course, we learned about nutrient metabolism and organic chemistry and some of these foundational classes that are very pertinent and important. But there were also a lot of classes that held a lot of bias and that held a lot of fat phobia and a lot of these diet culture beliefs. So when you come over to intuitive eating and health at every size, not only do you need to challenge your belief systems and unlearn everything that you were taught, but now you have to seek out additional forms of education through certifications, through mentors, through colleagues that have been doing this for a lot longer than you have. And that's, first of all, I want to acknowledge that takes a lot of privilege. It takes resources, it takes money, it takes time to do all of those things. But also, I want to recognize that it takes a lot of privilege. Takes a lot of courage in addition to the privilege. So, not only do you have these privileges that you have to be able to do this, but now you have to have the courage to say, I fucked up. Um, my education, right, where I learned from in the past, did not equip me for what I want to do to help people. And now I have to go unlearn and relearn so I can do what I actually want to do. That is really, really difficult. And I find that a lot of people get stuck splinter assing, as I like to call it. A mentor of mine taught me this term. So, Fiona Sutherland, who is the mindful dietitian on Instagram, I did some supervision with Fiona, and she called this like the splinter assing. And what that means is you have one foot in diet culture, right? You have this one foot in classically trained dietetics. And then you have this other foot on the other side of the fence in intuitive eating. And I find that a lot of registered dietitians get stuck like just on this fence, right? They have one foot in intuitive eating. They're like, this sounds really good. This is really what I want to do. I'm really passionate about this. I believe this. But their fear keeps them stuck in the diet culture side where they're like, but how could I have a private practice if I don't sell weight loss? How could I turn away from weight loss when everybody wants to lose weight? And this is that splinter assing that occurs. And this is something that I want to normalize for you if you don't even have to be a registered dietitian. If you are let's say you're a medical professional, you're a pediatrician, and these new AAP bullshit guidelines came out, and you're like, whoa, I don't believe in these. So you now find yourself engaging with more of the intuitive eating things. But as a pediatrician, you've been classically trained to talk about weight in front of children, which we know over here in the intuitive eating side is going to contribute to eating disorder. So there's so much nuance to this conversation. And I want to normalize how easy it is to get stuck on the fence and to say, well, I'm gonna teach intuitive eating, but I'm gonna keep my foot over here because if somebody wants to lose weight, I'll help them do it in a way that's like ethical and moral. No, 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 no. I'm here to tell you that the longer you splinter ass for, it is going to be detrimental to your mental health. Not only is it going to harm your patients and going to harm the people that you come in contact with, but it is and counsel, but you're going to be very conflicted. It's going to harm your mental health. You're going to feel a lot of imposter syndrome. You're not going to be able to be firmly rooted in intuitive eating where you can actually help people if you're still preaching intentional weight loss. And take it from someone who did that and almost broke. And it almost broke me. And I was this close to saying, I'm getting the fuck out of this field. I don't want to be a dietitian anymore. I can't do this anymore. I don't even know what I believe anymore. And I was so close. I had like a total mental breakdown. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I truly believe that getting to that rock bottom point was what helped me realize, no, you know what you believe. You are an intuitive eating dietitian, but you have to let go of diet culture. And it's fucking scary when our society is so fat phobic, right? Our education is so fat phobic. Everything is just rooted in these diet culture beliefs. So walking away from that is really scary, especially when you're taught as a dietitian that like weight loss is your party trick and people think that all that you do is help people lose weight. So that's why I don't tell people I'm a dietitian anymore, because I really don't think I am. I tell people I'm an intuitive eating, well, sometimes I don't even say that. I just say I'm an eating disorder counselor. And that usually like then people won't ask me like, "Oh, how can I lose weight?" Because if I say I'm a dietitian, then that usually starts that conversation, which I just don't want to have. All right. So last but not least, and I touched on this a little bit, but I want to circle back to it. Being an intuitive eating dietitian means you also are including medical nutrition therapy in your practice. And that is a big like myth and a lot of misinformation I see on social media. People thinking that as an intuitive eating dietitian, we don't help people with chronic diseases. Um, I've helped people with diabetes get their A1C from like 9.3, I believe I forget if it was 9.1 or 9.3 to below 6.0. Like we help people with diseases and medical conditions, and we help them with medical nutrition therapy, but we do it from a place that is not judging or shaming or guilting the person into making change. That's the big difference. Whew. I feel like we got to take a deep breath. If you are still with me and liking what I'm saying and you're here with me live, just double tap the screen. Just let me know that you're here. Let me know that you're seeing this, that you're hearing this, that this is resonating with you. And as you do that, we're going to get right into the end of this kind of conversation is what are steps that you can take if you're someone who's saying, I'm splinter assing right now. I'm the dietitian or I'm the medical professional who has one foot in diet culture and has one foot in intuitive eating, health at every size. First of all, I want to give you all of the credit in the world that it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to even get to that place. So give yourself credit for how far you've come. Please make sure step number one, I would say, is give yourself grace, because you shaming yourself is only going to keep you stuck on top of that fence with a splinter far up your ass. So you have to give yourself grace that you are doing the best that you can. Once you know better, you can do better. And all of the harm, like I'll use myself as an example, all of the harm that I did when counseling clients back in my diet culture dietitian days, I wasn't sitting there saying like, yay, I can't wait to cause harm. I genuinely thought I was helping people. So it's important to recognize if you caused harm, shaming yourself and getting stuck in that shame isn't going to help you. And it definitely isn't going to help your patients or your clients or the people that you want to serve. So it's important to recognize I caused harm. I take accountability for the harm that I've caused. And now that I know better, I can do better. And I'm going to educate myself. I'm going to pay professionals in marginalized bodies. I'm going to learn from people that don't look like me. I am going to recognize my privileges. I'm going to stop using my body as the billboard of my business because I hold privilege, right? There's so many ways we could look at this. So, one is give yourself grace. Two is find a mentor. Find somebody, like if you're a pediatrician, we'll find a Hayes aligned pediatrician. If you are a dietitian, find a dietitian that is rooted in health at every size, intuitive eating. Um, Find a supervisor. I mentioned Fiona Sutherland earlier. Haley Goodrich is another one of my good friends who also offers supervision to intuitive eating dietitians. Find somebody who has been doing what you want to do a lot longer than you and ask them questions. Learn from them, learn from their lived experiences. This is why I share my story, because if I can help one dietetic student, one health professional get off the fence quicker than I did, pull the splinter out of your ass quicker than I did, then it's worth it. Because if you can find a mentor who can help you, it makes it so much easier. So much easier. And then on that note, I guess this would be number 3. This is the third and final thing I would offer, but you could switch 2 and 3 if you wanted, is find medical professionals and professionals in the field that inspire you. We have loads and loads of professionals that we give to clients, like their accounts on Instagram and TikTok and their websites and all of their amazing links to go follow that don't look like us. Follow humans and marginalized bodies that are saying the same things that we're saying here at Find Food Freedom. Follow the dietitians that are doing the health at every size work, that are doing the intuitive eating work. If you are splinter assing, it is very important to unfollow all of the dietitians that are promising intentional weight loss, that are promising intuitive eating and weight loss. Huge red flag. If they're talking about, you know, change your body to love yourself, extremely harmful. So unfollow the dietitians that are steeped in diet culture and follow the dietitians that you strive to be like. And I want to use an example that, again, I always can pull myself as an example. So I live here in Florida, and I remember finding Christy Harrison very early in my splinter assing days. So if you do not follow Christy Harrison, highly recommend it. Her book is on my shelf behind me here, Anti-Diet, amazing book. She has another book coming out in April that is all about wellness culture. So Christy Harrison is an anti-diet dietitian, and she also is the host of the Food Psych podcast. And it's one of the leading podcasts in the anti-diet space. And it was a huge inspiration to my co-host Jenna and I when we started What the Actual Fork podcast. But why I say this and why I bring up Christy is I remember going on long walks on the beach and just binge listening to the Food Psych podcast and listening to episode after episode after episode. And I remember Christy saying similar things to like what I'm saying right now about like finding a mentor, listening to dietitians that you want to be like. And I remember just like crying like on the beach. I was just on these long walks in the middle of nowhere on the beach. And I was like sobbing because I'm listening to her podcast and I'm like, I want to be like her, right? I want this, but I have no idea how to get there. And that fear paralyzed me and kept me stuck, like I talked about, on like splinter assing longer than it needed to until I got mentors, until I started talking to other dietitians and having these conversations. And so now let's bring it full circle. It's 2023. Not only have we had Christy Harrison as a guest on the What the Actual Fork podcast, but in a few short weeks, I'm not gonna share yet because I don't know if I can yet. Um, I know that there is an article that Christy and I were both quoted on for about intuitive eating in a major publication. So that's my only like little it's like a little teaser. I'm not going to say who it is, like what publication it is. But when the person when the author let me know that they were quoting Christy Harrison and then they're gathering our quotes, that was like a pinch me moment where I can so easily go back to the younger version of Sammy years ago on the beach who was crying listening to the Christy Harrison podcast, the Food Psych podcast, and saying, I want to be like her. I want to do what she's doing. I want to help people in that way, but I don't know how. And now, full circle, I get to work alongside her in this space. And so the reason I come on here today on National Registered Dietitian Day is you can do that too. I can't tell you how many times we have dietetic interns that we work with. I mentioned that at the beginning of this. We have students we work with that say, "Oh my gosh, I followed you for so many years and I love what you're doing and I want to do what you're doing." And I'm like, "Fuck yeah. That's great. Let's go." We need more intuitive eating dietitians. We need more health at every size dietitians. We need more people. And there is so much room for you at the table. And so I hope that this message reaches the dietitians that need to hear this, that you can unlearn. You can dismantle all of the diet culture beliefs that you have. You can help the people that you want to help. You can do this. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's really fucking hard work. There are many times that I have cried. I've had mental breakdowns. I call my mentors and my colleagues and all of the people that surround me and say, "I can't do this anymore. I feel like I can't," but you can. And so I I leave you here today with hopefully some hope, right? Some hope that you can do this. And do not be afraid to reach out to us here at Find Food Freedom. We have internships, we have summer intern spots that we're looking to fill right now. If you go over to findfoodfreedomresources.com or click the link in any of our social media platforms, you'll see it says like apply to be a summer intern. We would absolutely love if you are a dietetic student, if you're looking for mentorship, if you're looking to learn, um, that's what we're here for. So we love connecting with students. I love connecting with students. We have Anna, another one of our team members who kind of heads up our internship, and she's so passionate because she was one of those students that started with Find Food Freedom way back in the day when we were fence straddling, and now she is here on our team helping others as well. So again, findfoodfreedomresources.com. That is if you are a nutrition student or a younger, newer dietitian who, or not, it doesn't matter how many years you've been in the field. I apologize for even saying that. It doesn't matter how many years you've been in the field. It is never too late to unlearn and to choose a different path. So that's my spiel. That's how myself, Sammy, I went from diet culture dietitian to intuitive eating dietitian. I hope you can take some nuggets away from this and and not be afraid to take that risk, because I can promise you, as scary as the risk is, it is so rewarding too.